Go ahead and call this workshop meeting into session. And so, board members and what staff and superintendent, what we'll do is we'll do like we've always done. We'll just move down through every item on the agenda. And if you have comments, questions, or superintendent, if you have staff that wish to present, please stop me and just call them forward. All right, of course, the first item is opening of the meeting. Second item is the approval of the agenda. And we do have a couple of agenda changes, so as routine, let me read those very quickly. Committee and staff reports added item 7.4, Department of Education report update, and then consent agenda correction to item 8.14, renewal of tag-on bid for bleacher repair and maintenance. The contract bid number is RFQU 19-968-523-RN. So those are the changes that we have to the agenda. And we'll move on now to recognitions under item 3. 3.1, recognition of Ruckle Middle School dance team state champions in the middle school hip hop division at the Florida Dance Championships presented by Superintendent Chambers. 3.2, recognition of Meigs Middle School archery team as the 2019 state champions in the National Archery State Program middle school division presented by the superintendent. 3.3, recognition of Madison Mall, Meigs Middle School, state champion of the 2019 National Archery School Program for middle school girls, presented by Superintendent Chambers. And then 3.4, recognition of Shalimar Elementary School archery team as the 2019 state champions in the National Archery State Program Elementary School Division, presented by Superintendent Chambers. That takes us to section 4, visitors. Betty Mendez, request to address the school board. Public comment, 5.1. This will be members of the public wishing to address the school board. Section 6, 6.1, administrative personnel appointments. The appointment of the principal for Choctawhatchee High School, recommended by the superintendent for approval. And then 6.2, appointment of principal Silver Sands School, recommended by the superintendent for approval. Moving on to section 7, committee and staff reports. This is for workshop only. This is information. 7.1 is in-county travel paid for the period of February 21 through March the 20th, 2019, presented by Mrs. Rita Scallon, Chief Financial Officer. 7.2, out-of-county travel paid for the period of February 21 through March the 20th, 2019, presented by Mrs. Rita Scallon, Chief Financial Officer. 7.3, financial and federal single audit for the fiscal year ended June 30th, 2018, report number 2019-135, February 2019, and operational audit 2019-057, November 2018, presented by Mrs. Rita Scallon, Chief Financial Officer.
Chairman, if I may, I just wanted to ask Rita a brief question. Rita, would you explain to us the district's proportional share of the Florida Retirement System's net pension liability? I saw there was some variation slight. Is there a hard and fast rule that we have to be in a certain area with that? And I also want to congratulate y'all. The audit doesn't have any findings that are not positive, so that's good. But just for all of us, explain what our proportion should be, shall be.
Okay. The Florida Retirement System, each school district pays into that Florida Retirement System. Technically, theoretically, the school district, once they make those contributions to the state, no longer has any liability or any obligation to pay retirement to employees because it's administered at the state level and they are the responsible party, the Florida Retirement System, for those benefits paid to employees upon retirement. However, there have been some accounting changes in what's called generally accepted accounting principles, and so basically what happens is that now they say that even though it's the state's obligation, it's a state's obligation and they're funded for it, because they want governmental entities to be comparable to private entities, that they've made they continue to make changes. They continue to make changes to accounting principles, and so that's why it has to be reflected as it has to be. But to get back to what I was saying, so what they do is 67 districts, they take the contributions that you're paying in, and that whatever your proportionate share is to the total, they show that as a liability in our financial statements, but we are not liable for that.
Okay, well, I just noticed it changed slightly, and so that really is not a reflection of any job that we're doing. It's just the way they've changed it around.
Right, and it will continue to change because, of course, your distribution of potential eligible or people that retire changes. So every year it's going to fluctuate.
Okay, thanks. I just
Okay.
wanted to ask you to clarify that so in my mind I understood what I was looking at.
Yeah.
And could I just follow up with just a couple of things? I think this is a relatively new requirement, if I understand correctly. Is that right?
It's been now in place for the last probably 4 or 5 years, but as each year progresses, that amount will change and probably change in an upward direction, so it becomes more apparent when you're looking at the financial statements.
Yes, ma'am. And so before that, though, this was never a component of an audit. And so this is fairly recent in the last 4 or 5 years.
Well, and when it's a component of the audit, they're not really auditing it.
Right.
They're just saying that we
Comment.
have to reflect it on our financial
That's right.
statements.
Okay. And then the other thing is, I think this change, it didn't just pertain to school boards. I think this is now reflected in, and correct me if I'm wrong, every governmental program.
Correct, that participates in the Florida retirement system.
Okay. So not just school boards. Okay. All right, very good. All right, thank you. All right, so unless there's anything else, colleagues, we'll go ahead and move forward. 7.4, Department of Education Report Update, presented by Superintendent Marcus Chambers. Superintendent.
Thank you, sir. Would like this opportunity to kind of address where we are right now with our ESC program. And I want to have Mr. Palmer come up, but I would like to say a few things first of all. So as you know, back in January, I asked the Department of Education to come in and take a look at our ESC programs, both at the district level and at the school level, to provide us with some recommendations on how we can be even better in our ESC programs. Since that time, we've had a lot of meetings with parents, with teachers, even as late as yesterday, had an ESC parent meeting at the north end of the, an ESC teacher meeting at the north end of the county. Received some great input and feedback from teachers. So a lot has happened with ESC over the course of the last 11 to 12 weeks. One of the things that I do want to say as it pertains to this report that we're going to go through very thoroughly, the Department of Education did provide us with some accommodations, and they definitely provided us with some recommendations. And we are in the process of doing a comprehensive review of our ESC program, both at the district level and at the school level. So with what Mr. Palmer's going to go through, you'll see some very clear plans of what we plan to do going forward. But I do want to put a caveat out there that some of this is ongoing as we continue to talk with teachers, as we continue to talk with school administration, and as we continue to talk with parents. So I'm very proud of where we are right now to date. As Mr. Palmer goes through the DOE report, he's going to hit each of the recommendation bullets and give some specific feedback about what we're doing. I may or may not jump in as well. A lot of time and attention has been placed on this, and it needs to be a lot of time and attention placed on this. Our goal is to get this right. There's a number of things that we do well, and there's a number of things that we can do even better. One thing I do want to say that has been clear as we've gone through this process, especially as we've talked with parents. Parents have expressed a lot of positive praise for our teachers, for our ed support and the work that they're doing, but they have also shared some frustration in terms of some of our processes. And those are going to be some of the things that we strive to do and will do even better.
Welcome, Mr. Palmer.
Thank you, sir. With your
Sure,
permission,
sure.
I'll
Yeah, please
hand
do.
out some information to you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Okay, so in your folders, if you open it up, clipped to the left side is the actual report. There's a letter on the front, and then the report follows. My plan is to sort of briefly outline the elements of this report, but then on the right side of the folder is their recommendations and our response or our plan to meet those recommendations. That's the part that I think we'll spend a fair amount of time on, if that's okay. All right, so back in February, the DOE did pay us a visit at Mr. Chambers' request, and they visited 2 schools, Kenwood and Silver Sands School. They asked us to put together some focus groups at each of those, and in the report, when you get through to, let me see here, at the bottom of page 1 of the report, you'll see an administrator focus group with some comments that follow. Some of the things that came out as they met with administrators at these 2 schools. Then there's a teacher focus group that follows on page 2, a paraprofessional focus group, a school behavioral team focus group, and then they met here at this office that afternoon, the afternoon of the second day, with a parent focus group. All of those comments are in the report there that you can read at some point in time.
Mr. Palmer, can I ask you something, please?
Certainly.
They went to Kenwood and Silver Sands. Was that our suggestion, or did they choose those schools?
It was our suggestion.
Okay, so you said, or we said, go to Silver Sands, go to Kenwood.
Yes, they asked, did we have particular schools? We said yes. How
Okay.
about these 2? And let me say, this was an abbreviated visit. It was a 2-day visit that they actually fit into their schedule at Mr. Chambers' request. Usually it's a 3 or 4-day visit where they'll visit 5 or 6 schools. So they
Okay.
did this, they kind of helped us out by fitting it in and going to those 2 schools, but we're able to glean a lot of information to share with us, and I will say they're coming back in the fall, and probably, I think it'll be more of a full visit in the fall where they'll go to more schools.
Okay, all right, thank you.
And I would add one piece to that, and those 2 particular schools, as you know, there's a lot of great things that happen at Silver Sands and Kenwood, but the truth is there were some concerns at both of those
Right.
2 schools. So when they suggested 2 schools, those were the 2 schools that we gave them due to some of the incidents that had occurred.
Okay.
Okay, so then on page 4 of the report, you'll see that 2019-20 next steps, and that's where the recommendations begin. But just above that, there are some accommodations that they gave us that I want to make sure we go through. Number 1, under the commendations, it says the district's 17-18 graduation rate for students with disabilities increased to 85.6%, which is above the state target of 62.3%.
Well above.
Yes.
Way above, yeah, that's
We're
great.
Quite proud of that. Number 2, the district's 17-18 dropout rate for students with disabilities decreased to 7.1%, which is below the state target of 10%. So again, a significant difference. Also, they noted that Silver Sands Center School created an outside partnership with Karen Erickson and the Center for Literacy and Disability Studies to assist with instruction for students with significant disabilities. I believe that's affiliated with the University of North Carolina. That is something that the school did on its own. They did request our help in getting that process done. The board attorney helped with that back in the early stages of it, and they took that ball and really ran with it. And I would encourage you, if you haven't been by Silver Sands, check into that project and see what a difference it's made in several kids' lives there. So very proud of that as well.
Great.
So then the back of the report just lists a lot of resources available from the state. Okay? So that's the report in, 3 or 4 minutes. But what I would like to do now is go to every recommendation that they made and then give you our plan to address those recommendations. So that's in the document on the right side. So the first area that they suggested was training. So recommendations for additional training, it says it's recommended the district collaborate with B's discretionary projects on strategies and professional development training for staff for each of the following. Number 1, collaborate with the Florida Inclusion Network and the district's newly formed ESC Parent Advisory Group to complete the triannual Best Practices for Inclusive Education, or BPI, you'll hear it referred to, prior to the beginning of the 1920 school year. So our response, the district portion of BPI, in collaboration with Finn, was completed in November of 18 and will be shared with the Parent Advisory Council to collaborate on implementation. I did want to say some of this plan was already in place before this visit. Other elements, we enhanced the plan, and there's elements of this plan that are brand new after their recommendations. So that report, our district level BPI, was already completed prior to this visit. It's in Finn's hands, waiting on them to confirm, but once they do, we'll certainly be sharing it with the school Parent Advisory Council. The second bullet, ongoing scheduled quarterly ESC Parent Advisory Council meetings to continue collaboration on BPI. Again, we'll be sharing this information with that group.
And the next meeting that we'll have with the ESC Parent Advisory Council will be in May.
Next bullet, the district portion of BPI will be available on the OCSD webpage. Following confirmation from Finn, we anticipate that to be fairly quickly. Don't know the exact time. The last bullet to this one, each school was provided a training by Finn on completing the BPI. School BPIs are due to Finn by June 30th of this year and will be posted on each school's webpage following confirmation from Finn. So there is an overall BPI for the entire district, and then each individual school has to create a plan for their own school as well.
And Mr. Palmer, just briefly, and I know BPI is the best practices for inclusive education, but just a brief summary, what is BPI?
Well, it's the plan to include as much as possible ESE students in the general ed setting, to include them whenever and wherever possible in regular classes. And I do think, and Ms. Summer may check me on this, I think we have about an 83% rate of doing just that. Is that correct? So 83% of our ESE students are in those settings, on those regular general ed settings.
And we have district staff that help schools complete theirs if they need it.
Absolutely. Yes, ma'am.
And I would say where that is a good number, the 83%, but I think we can still continue to do a good job working with parents, working with schools, where we can do even better on inclusive education. Wonderful. So 83% is good, but where we can get even better, we'll strive to do so.
And just a quick
Yes, sir.
comment. How much of that is a function of the IEP team for each individual child?
Oh, well, I might lean on Ms. Summer's expertise, but I think a great deal.
And I guess the point I'm trying to make, and you know what it is that that's I believe you will say, a collaborative decision
To be included in general education, absolutely. It's an individual decision.
involving the parent.
It is an individual
And
decision
staff
involving the
and so
parent, the
forth.
IEP team. The state does set targets, though,
Right.
for us to try to reach, because that is the goal. The overall goal would be to have all students
Sure.
included, so that's what we
If
strive to
everyone
do.
concurred and the
That's
IEP
right.
team.
Everyone on the
Right.
team agrees it's appropriate.
Okay. All right, thank you.
So, Ms. Summers, I'm
Yes.
sorry. So the superintendent says we're trying to move that up. Ultimately, we like 100%, but we're going to move that up. So if it's through the IEP, what kind of goal do you have set, or do you have a specific goal to reach?
To
To have the participation rate?
hire,
Mm-hmm.
well, the state's next target, I hear, is going to be 85%.
Okay.
So we're going to continue to climb toward that.
So basically, you just encourage when you're covering the IEPs and between the teacher and the staff and everything, to encourage those students to engage in activities and courses where they would be in.
Where they would be included.
Okay.
Right.
All right.
And again, it's all about the educational benefit that the student would gain and if it's appropriate.
And this is across the board from elementary on all the way through secondary?
Pre-K through
Okay.
grade 12.
And not just Okaloosa, right?
No, sir.
Right.
Statewide.
Right, okay,
Nationwide.
all right, thank you.
Wait to sit right.
Oh, yeah, stay close. Number two, They said to continue focusing on social skill instruction and de-escalation strategies, to include the multi-agency network for students with emotional behavior disorders, SEDNET, training on trauma-informed care, the Florida Positive Behavior Intervention and Support Project, multi-tiered systems of support, behavioral support training in the Center for Autism and Related Disabilities, CARD, behavioral supports for students with autism. So, our first bulleted response, SEDNET will facilitate a summer workshop July 24th and 25th to address social skills and behavior supports for ESC teachers. That's already on the books. Next, 3 mandatory district trainings will be conducted during the school year, catering to the needs of self-contained ESC students, teachers. That's going to be EBD teachers, CBS teachers, and VE teachers clustered together.
And that is a change. As you know, we have a pretty comprehensive professional development program in our county, and our ESC teachers have also been asking for that, and that's something that'll be different in 2019-20, where we will be very specific in our professional development for not only the ESC teachers, but also our parapros, which you'll see come in as well.
That was my question, too.
That's
All right,
great.
and so to follow up on that, then I'm assuming that we'll be expending resources for that. I mean, whether it's substitute time or,
Yes, sir. Many of these projects, like SEDNET and Fillers, they are state projects that provide the training for free. But as you allude to, we'll have to have some substitutes and other expenses to incur.
So to meet this particular recommendation, we will be willing to expend additional resources that wheretofore we haven't, but we will now.
So yes and no.
Right.
So a little bit of it is already, PD has already been allocated in the past per teacher. So this will be more specific and required. So that piece is, the required piece is different, but the funding has been there. But there will be some additional funding, and you'll see as we get into staffing, there will be some additional dollars that would go towards staffing as well in the 2019-20 budget.
Well, and I just think it's important then to recognize that we are sincere about this to the point that we will expend additional resources.
Yes, sir.
And then that begs the question, will our substitutes in those specialized ESC classrooms have the training too? Because they could experience some of these behaviors and need to know how to respond.
Yes, ma'am. That is definitely a challenge for us, getting the subs and then training the subs. So that is something that's on our radar, and we are working through on how best to attend to that.
Would that be something that's anywhere in this? I know this isn't specifically what they're looking at, but that is something we have had some concerns about substitute situation.
Yes, ma'am.
And certainly with a unique population of students, that would be even more so, I would think.
Yes, I don't think the state report addresses substitutes specifically, but we are,
But we are.
we know that it's a need and that it's a challenge that we have to meet.
And I
So-
will say HR is looking at and investigating training for substitutes. And as you can imagine, it's difficult to find the time to do so, but that is one thing that is being investigated. I think that's a great point, though, in terms of what you said, Dr. Kelly, some of the training as it pertains to ESC. So that's something, Dr. Hell, as we look at that, coordinating with ESC on an additional component to that training.
Now, we don't pay any additional funds to the ESC substitutes, do we? It's all the same? But
It's all the same.
But we may be doing more training, it sounds like.
Training will be a huge focus, an even bigger focus, because we have a focus already, but it'll be an even bigger focus as we go into this summer and 2019-20.
But when it comes to substitutes, we already know that we often have a shortage of getting substitutes in there. And so when a teacher asks for a sub, they don't say, I need somebody who's got the background with ESE. It's kind of just sent out there in the system. Or I wonder if we are going to be able to make any change in that and designate some substitutes who have, I mean, the teachers know people who will come in and handle that, they get that, but in the big picture, that's just something to kind of think of and
Gotcha.
keep as an item.
And you're right, many times these ESC teachers have specific names who they call and say, hey, I'm going to be out next Wednesday. But you're also right, if they are sick unexpectedly or something, sometimes it does just go out into the system. And So that is a
Yet
challenge.
who can take it, yeah.
That's right, yes, ma'am.
Well, that looks to me like it's a flaw in the system that we need to look at.
Yes, sir. We stopped a little short of finishing bullet two,
Yes.
so I did want to hit that. The topics that will be taught include conscious discipline with SEDNet, autism training from CARD, and access point training from the Access Project. The next bullet, de-escalation training for student training program monitors, our STP folks, school resource officers, bus drivers, bus assistants, and others will continue throughout the school year. That de-escalation training, I think, is the 3-hour component of QBS training, trying to avoid a situation from getting worse.
Excuse me,
Sure.
Mr. Chambers, while we're on that, if you don't mind, are we still in favor of keeping that STP program? Are you thinking we're going to stay with that format?
So currently, that is the format.
Right.
That is something that's being investigated.
Okay, all right, thank you.
And that may be something that might be looked at as we head into the budget process.
Right.
If that's his choice.
Yeah, okay, that's good.
All right, the next bullet, Quality Behavior Solutions, or QBS, course training for ESE teachers, ESE assistants, administrators, and other staff members the principal deems appropriate will be provided throughout the school year. And that's the full, I think it's a 12-hour course. Is that right, Melody? 12 hours? So a 12-hour full course every year, then to recertify as a 6-hour course. The HERO program, it's a pilot program, a positive behavior incentive program, will be expanded to include additional middle schools for next year. I think we had 5 middle schools use that this year. It's paid for through Title IV. That funding didn't become available until October. So we started in October. Got some good feedback from it. So there are going to be some other schools who have heard and are interested. So we'll move from 5 to some more. I can't give you that exact number at this time. I don't know it. But I know there's some who've expressed interest in including that. And that's not necessarily an ESE thing. That's for every student. But obviously ESE students can benefit from it.
And on that note, you'll see in number 2 where the state suggested the Florida Positive Behavioral Intervention and Support, in essence PBIS, is a positive behavior system. So we have the HERO pilot program that we've already been looking at. So we're looking at that to go forward because we already have schools in place. So Mr. Palmer has been in contact with the state as well. So the big piece there is that we have something in place going forward as opposed to having nothing.
So was this the first year we did the HERO program?
Yes, ma'am.
Okay, and how's that doing?
Well, anecdotally, I can tell you,
Yeah.
I've spoken with the principals, and they like it. The 5 schools who used it said it is making a difference. Like I said, we didn't start till October, so
Right.
it's going to be a little hard to have hard data necessarily, but we'll get what we can once school is out, and we'll compare, referral rates and things like that, and suspension rates, and see at those 5 schools compared to maybe the previous years what kind of difference it did make. To hear them tell it, the discipline folks at those schools think it's very beneficial. They say they are seeing a difference, a positive difference.
Okay, good.
All right, next page, number 3. Continue district collaboration with CARD and the Partnership for Effective Programs for Students with Autism Teacher Partnership, the Florida Diagnostic and Learning Resource System, Fiddlers, and Fiddlers Multidisciplinary Educational Service Centers to provide professional development for teachers of students with autism spectrum disorder. The PD should include analysis of functions of severe problem behaviors and strategies for providing support for these students. So we, the district, will work with school principals to identify teachers and recommend they partner with the Partnership for Effective Programs for Students with Autism. PEPSA is its acronym. Teachers have to apply for acceptance to this program. It's a 2-year partnership. So we will be working with principals to pick teachers, identify teachers, encourage them to apply, hopefully get accepted into the program. So that's our plan moving forward. Collaborate with Emerald Coast Autism Center to provide training for teachers with students with autism spectrum disorder. I think that's something that maybe you visited yesterday with Ms. Summer.
So yesterday, myself and Ms. Summer met with the Emerald Coast Autism Center. It was a great visit. They have a fantastic facility, fantastic program. Most of their kids are one-on-one. I think they have approximately 90 kids that come at different parts of the day. The majority of them have one-on-one care. Everything is very individualized. As you know, in our school system, we don't necessarily have one-on-one care. But what we did do is we already had a partnership, but we kind of strengthened that partnership with the expertise of Ms. Summer, where we're going to look to them as well and partnering with training, with ideas. So I was very encouraged by yesterday's meeting. Ms. Summer did a great job yesterday, and I think that they are also very encouraged to partner with us, whether it be our teachers even going in there or their teachers even coming to us. And if there are questions on that in terms of specificity, Ms. Summer will have to come up and talk the details.
No.
Well, it's expert knowledge.
That's right.
There's no question.
The last bullet under this one, district staff will provide coaching experiences for teachers of students with autism spectrum disorder. That's a goal of ours, to get in and not only just deliver information, but maybe demonstrate with those teachers, critique those teachers and whatnot.
What does that mean, the coaching, what do you mean, coaching experiences? Just allow them some practical.
Yes, ma'am.
Hands-on,
Just
okay.
like our academic coaches.
Right.
They can deliver information on strategies, but then they also go into classrooms, observe the teacher trying to implement those strategies,
Right.
critique. The teacher could watch the coach use these strategies, learn in that way, just collaboration.
So what staff would probably be handling that?
Well, I think there is a thought of perhaps having ESE coaches.
Okay.
And if not, then current ESE staff, there are folks who could go in and do that. We can also partner with, as Mr. Chambers was just describing, outside entities like the
could come over.
Autism Center.
That'd be great.
Yes, ma'am.
And our goal for the 2019-20 budget would be to have, not necessarily a specified number yet, but would be to have some ESE coaches that can provide expertise for our teachers.
Right, okay.
All right, moving on to number 4, consider utilizing CARD for the ASD Preventing Seclusion and Restraint for Students with ASD and the Emotional and Behavioral Disabilities, moving from crisis management to crisis prevention for students' trainings. OCSD will collaborate with CARD Center to provide online training on moving from crisis management to crisis prevention for students. Training will be available to all schools, and training would be assigned as needed throughout the school year. This is an online training. We're still investigating exactly how it works or how long it is, how many hours and whatnot, but it's certainly available to any who would want to, and if we see the need, then we would assign it to be done.
And we've already reached out to CARD and
Yes, sir.
spoken with them as well.
Yes, sir, absolutely. Number 5, collaborate with SEDNet and CARD regarding facilitating a comprehensive system of care for high-risk students and students with ASD, EBD, and their families. So Okaloosa will begin attending Circuit 1 monthly collaboration meetings with SEDNet and CARD beginning this month. Attendees may include DCF, community agencies, and school districts. Part of the Circuit 1 is Escambia, Santa Rosa, Walton, and us. That's something that's new to us, and I think we're excited about it, especially having some outside entities like DCF. They do come together monthly to talk about their most challenging situations, to collaborate on solutions. So that's something we're pretty excited to become part of.
And my understanding is issues that occur from these meetings, if you need additional support beyond Circuit 1, it can then go to a regional and then can go all the way to the state. And what was shared with me is that many times this never, across the state of Florida, never makes it to the state for additional help and support. So I'm very glad that we're going to be a part of these meetings, so where we have some students who may need some additional, and I'm just going to call it help, hopefully we can move it through this system and get students what they need.
All right, number 6, collaborate with Fiddlers and Finn for professional development, including inclusive scheduling training. So Okaloosa will collaborate with Fiddlers and Finn to provide a summer training to secondary administrators on inclusive scheduling. That'll occur this summer. Number 7, train local school administrators on how to better use and verify data on educational settings for their students. So our first bullet, during the 1920 school year, Florida Inclusion Network will provide training for secondary school administrators and school staff on inclusive scheduling. The training goal is to increase inclusionary practices for the ESC students. A little bit of repetition from number 6, but that's a very similar goal here. Scheduling those kids, getting us from the 83% to the 85%.
And so at a school setting, that would be obviously the administrator, but also some guidance counselors in there, so.
Yes, ma'am. The master scheduler,
Right.
whoever that may be, usually an assistant principal, would be the primary person. But in collaborating with the counselors and even teachers of certain classes, along with obviously the principal will be involved.
Yeah, because I haven't seen anything here, I know we're moving along, yet on guidance counselors' role in some of these things, so I'm sure it's in
Right.
there.
Yes, ma'am. There's some mention of guidance counselors in the staffing recommendations.
Okay.
But actually, I don't think the state mentioned them in the training section of this. But obviously, we are aware, and we're not limited to only
Right.
what the state said.
Sure.
There's other situations we know need addressing, and that's certainly one of them.
Thank you.
And routinely, those counselors are included in the IEP.
Oh, absolutely. Yes, sir.
Right.
Second bullet, during the 1920 school year, Finn will provide support facilitation training to gen ed teachers and ESE teachers. The training goal of this is to increase collaboration between the gen ed teacher and the ESE teacher. Last bullet, during 1920, Fiddlers will provide the state's newly developed accommodations training for general education and ESE teachers. So that is new. We haven't seen it. I think we've been in contact with Fiddlers. I believe they indicated they're in the process of training their trainers. And as this rolls out, we'll learn more. We'll certainly keep you informed of this training. But we definitely want to be part of it.
The last thing that I would say on the training aspect, so a lot of this is ESC that we're talking about, but also our general education teachers next year in professional development. There will be components of ESC training for our general education teachers next year going forward as well.
Well, certainly if we're trying to raise that bar on participation, and we're already at 83%, then this isn't an ESC teacher situation. This is a across-the-board situation,
Everybody coming
I think.
together.
Yeah, I think that's good.
All right, well, that'll move us into their recommendations on staffing. They state it's recommended that the district collaborate with other similarly sized districts to identify best practices for structuring district and school-level supports for all positions that provide services to students with disabilities, such as the following. Number 1, teacher-to-student ratios at center schools. Additional supports, for example, full-time behavior specialist, speech and language pathologist, social worker, and board-certified behavior analyst for students enrolled in special programs at cluster school sites. Consideration of caseloads and specific job descriptions assigned to behavioral specialists and staffing specialists to ensure implementation and follow-up activities regarding behavior plans and behavior goals in IEPs. Consideration of a designated staff member at each school site to monitor timelines for IEPs and scheduled meetings rather than the teachers. Provision of additional ESE certified teachers to offer support to students with disabilities served in general ed settings. And lastly, review district staff to ensure that there is adequate specialized support for teachers, leaders, for school leaders and teachers. So our plan,
Well, so here again, I'm hearing resources.
yes, sir. Absolutely.
I'm hearing possibly even travel.
Yes, sir.
All right.
Training.
So here again, the school district in attempting to solve and to address some of these concerns and issues, and this report is willing to further expend additional resources to remedy some of these situations. Okay, very good.
So our plan, first bullet, we are in the process of collaborating with other districts such as Santa Rosa, Bay, Leon, and Highlands County regarding this staffing. Similar counties, Highlands was recommended to us by the state. It's not one we normally communicate with, but they said they had had some good success with some of the things they had recommended to them. So we've been in contact with them and will continue to. We've actually physically visited Santa Rosa and Bay County and seen some things and talked to some of their folks. That'll be an ongoing effort as we move forward. Second bullet, an increase in ESC staff positions pertaining to the DOE recommendations above will be presented to the board at the 1920 board budget workshop. So as you said, it's going to take some more resources. I think the senior staff is working through that and will certainly be bringing that to the board.
Well, and all of this in light of no real new money from Tallahassee.
Correct.
Okay.
The third bullet, principals in collaboration with the ESC department will identify a staff member at each school to monitor timelines for IEPs and schedule the meetings. That'll help those teachers who have some pretty high caseloads as is. If we can provide administrative help for them to keep up with when those IEPs are due, make phone calls, set appointments, that'll be able to take a little bit of a load off of those teachers.
So you're talking a staff member like clerical or something like that to handle that? Is that what you're saying?
It could be, and we're going to work with principals and see. It could be different at different schools. It would depend on what that principal sees to be appropriate at their school, is how I envision it. But like I said, we'll be sitting down with the principals to collaborate with them and see what they come up with creatively.
And I want to be very clear on the staffing, because like Dr. White alluded to, so this takes money. And to do this, also some difficult decisions will have to be made. There's only a finite amount of money that's coming in.
Yep.
And so we will have to make decisions based on the amount of money that's coming in. ESC will be a major, it's always a major focus, but it'll be a major focus as we go into 2019-20 in order to do a number of these things. Will all of this be able to be done in the year 2019-20? Probably not, but it's something that we're going to stay committed to. Behavior analysts is something that the state has really impressed upon us. It's very difficult to hire behavior analysts, and not only in Okaloosa County, but across the state of Florida. But we're going to put every effort out there to get some of these behavior analysts that can make a difference in our schools. But everything won't be able to be done in the next couple months. As you can imagine when you read through this, if we did every single recommendation, we'd be into the upper millions of dollars, and it's important. So we've also talked to the Department of Education. Is there an expectation that all of this is done in 2019-20? And she said to you,
No. She probably knew that wasn't going to be possible, but she did, and she being Ms. Viatorado, she's the bureau chief, she did say that as long as we're moving consistently and systematically towards these recommendations, that would be their expectation.
So it's quite a challenge then for your staff to decide what's feasible here, what's really realistic that we can.
correct. And as we go through the budget process right now, just reiterating that there will be some tough decisions that have to be made, and ESC will be a priority.
And I think it's important, and I know Superintendent, you and your staff and board members, you all understand this, is that all of this in light of increasing cost. That in other words, it's not just looking at adding new positions or travel or whatever the case might be. It's increasing cost with things that we currently already have, which that further complicates the process and what you'll have to do to produce the magic to come up with these funds.
and I'm going to try to say this accurately, and Rita will watch me, so I'm in dangerous area. So I think since 2007, the percent of funding has gone up approximately 1% in terms of funding for schools, but the consumer price index from that time has gone up approximately 20%.
So we're talking insurance rates, we're talking electricity, power, those kinds of things. Simple things, but they have a cost. All right.
All right, so we'll move on to recommendations for clarity of ESC programs. The state says, for additional clarity of ESC programs for students with disabilities, the district should consider following the following recommendations. Number one, outline the articulation processes for the transition of students from elementary to middle and from middle to high school, including a variety of placement options and supports available to students in general education settings. So we've responded, our articulation process will be outlined on the ESE department webpage by April 30th, as well as addressed throughout the ESE compliance training schedule. Quarterly parent trainings will be provided by the ESE department to include expectations on the transition from pre-K to K, elementary to middle, and middle to high. So we are going to start some parent trainings quarterly, getting them advertised and getting folks to attend.
And I believe this is what you were hearing from your parent groups too, wasn't that right, Mr.
Absolutely.
Chambers?
Yes.
That they wanted to see that, more information about the transitions. They're obviously anxious when they're moving from one, moving their babies from one section to the other, so.
Yes, ma'am.
That'd be good, yeah.
So when transitioning from one level to another, elementary to middle and so on, a transition IEP is held. So that information should be explained in great detail at that IEP meeting.
Good.
All right, so number two, provide clarity to staff and parents regarding specific ESE programs available for students with disabilities. The ESE program descriptions will be outlined on the ESE department webpage again by April 30th. Staffing specialists will also continue to clarify appropriate available programs during IEP meetings, making sure those parents and others know what is available for your child. General ed teachers will be provided information during regular school-based professional development on that same topic. Sometimes our own teachers, general ed teachers, might not even know what's available if it's not at their particular school. Quarterly parent training will be provided by the ESE department to discuss available ESE programs. Okay. And then the final category was instructional support. Number one, the state says collaborate with the Access Project to provide professional development and support to current instructional academic coaches and all teachers who provide instruction for students with disabilities enrolled in the Access courses. So the Access Project will provide training to all teachers who instruct students who are enrolled in Access courses. Many times that's a VE teacher, but many times it's a general ed classroom teacher as well. The ESE department will provide training to all academic coaches regarding appropriate strategies for students on access points. Again, that gen ed third grade teacher may have a student in her class who's on access points and they need assistance in how to help that child. The 1920 budget will include the addition of 2 ESE instructional coaches who will provide training to both general education and ESE teachers of students on access points. We actually discussed that a few minutes ago. Number 2, identify strategies to increase awareness of and participation in training for paraprofessionals for the following areas: social and emotional strategies to address students' behavioral needs, the components of an IEP and BIP and the roles of how to implement both, academic strategies to assist the teacher with instruction, the types of disabilities of the students in classrooms. So a 2-day ESE summer intensive training will be available for all ESE paraprofessionals. Now, many of those folks have summer jobs, so not all of them will be able to attend that summer session, but they will be offered then. In this next bullet, ESE parapros will receive quarterly training during the school year to address the topics above recommended by DOE. So they'll have a summer opportunity, but if they're unable to attend that one, we'll also provide that training throughout the school year.
Could it not be recorded for them to access later too as a
Yes, ma'am.
review?
We are not only in the ESE realm, but in the regular PD realm, we're already figuring out ways. Ms. Ellis is kind of leading that on how to record some of these trainings. If a teacher misses it or can't attend, they can watch it at 8 o'clock on a Saturday night. So that
Good.
we are moving in that direction. It's a great point. I wanted to just say one other thing. At the teacher meeting we were at yesterday with Mr. Chambers, the ESE teachers from the North End, the respect that they showed and the appreciation that they showed for their parapros was incredible. They know how valuable those folks are. Many of the parents say the same thing, and we certainly value them as a district. Our final statement here at the bottom, just Okaloosa County School District has a fluid ESE plan that will continue to evolve as we collaborate with parents, administrators, teachers, community and state agencies such as DOE, Fin, SEDNet, CARD, Fiddlers, etc. Just want to make sure everyone understands this is not it. This is the beginning of it, and we'll continue to move forward. Okay?
All right, any questions or comments, board members?
Very thorough, Mr. Palmer, and a lot of great information. I think we're really moving forward. Wish you could have found a few more little letter things in there for me to
Yes,
remember.
ma'am.
In the dictionary.
The VIPs and the whatever, yeah,
I
but
understand.
I'm working on that, but.
A lot of people worked very hard on this since the state visit, and a lot of people are very dedicated to seeing this improve.
Absolutely. Well, thank you very much.
And thank you for giving us the full report that we didn't even have to subpoena.
There you go.
Yeah, there you
Yes,
go.
sir.
We didn't get the redacted version.
And Dr.
Didn't
White,
get
do you
the
mind if I say
redacted.
one summary recap?
Go ahead.
And I do want to say as well, and it's 9:52, we've spent a lot of time on this, probably the most amount of time on an item probably in a long time. We've spoken with a number of teachers, and literally to the point where tears come out, because they're in this for a reason. They're in this for kids, and they know some of what we're going through right now. And I've said it a number of times. The vast majority of our teachers and ed support in our schools are doing things the right way. And this right here is the steps towards getting even better. I do want to say Melody Summer, who in essence for the last 20 years has almost been in a department of one administratively. She finally got a second person in this upcoming budget. We'll be recommending some additional support. The amount of light right now that's on ESC for someone who is in ESC and who's over that program sometimes could be daunting. She's been nothing but professional. She's been nothing but wanting to do this and get even better. So this could put a lot of stress on somebody, but the way she's handled it has been with the utmost professionalism, and I very much appreciate that. And Mr. Palmer has also stepped up in a huge way as well. So very happy, not giving excuses, but they both said, how could we do this even better? And I very much appreciate that.
Thank you. Yeah, great job. Thank you. So I guess the thing will be on, like Dr. White's been saying, the resources. We already know that we won't have the resources to do everything, but I'm sure that we can have a priority list so that we can make most of this happen.
I think you will see a lot, not everything, but there will be good progress being made for 2019-20.
Terrific.
And the real challenge is, of course, is those have to be reoccurring revenues, because this is not like buying new school buses or even building. This
Yeah.
is something that's going to be
Keep
every
going.
year. And that's a challenge for Mr. Chambers and Rita, since there are no additional reoccurring resources coming. But we look forward to the challenge, right?
Yes, sir.
All right, thank you, folks. Well, let's go ahead then and continue to move forward. And that brings us to Section 8, Consent Agenda. 8.1 will be the approval of agenda. 8.2, approval of the minutes of the student disciplinary hearings of March the 7th, 2019, the minutes of the workshop meeting of March the 7th, 2019, the minutes of the regular meeting of March 11th, 2019, recommended by Superintendent Chambers. 8.3, appropriation of District 1 School Board Member Capital Outlay Funds to Shalimar Elementary School for removal and replacement of portable building used as a PE shed and installation of ramp and electrical service in the amount of $7,308, presented by Lamar White and recommended by the superintendent for approval. 8.4, appropriation of District 2 School Board Member Capital Outlay Funds to Fort Walton Beach High School for fencing in the amount of $5,000, presented by Mr. Destin and recommended by the superintendent for approval. 8.5, appropriation of District 4 School Board Member Capital Outlay Funds to Antioch Elementary School for classroom flooring in the amount of $23,256, presented by Mr. Bryant and recommended by the superintendent for approval. 8.6, appropriation of District 5 School Board Member Capital Outlay Funds to Edge Elementary School for safety glass for the reception sign-in window and the front office door in the amount of $7,984, presented by Dr. Diane Kelly and recommended by the superintendent for approval. 8.7, budget amendment number 6, fiscal year 2018-2019, presented by Mrs. Scallon, Chief Financial Officer, and recommended by the superintendent for approval. 8.8, monthly financial statement for February 2019, presented by Mrs. Scallon, Chief Financial Officer, and recommended by the superintendent for approval. 8.9, invoices to be approved for payment, presented by Mrs. Scallon, Chief Financial Officer, and recommended by the superintendent for approval. 8.10, school donations, presented by Mrs. Rita Scallon, Chief Financial Officer, and recommended by the superintendent for approval. 8.11, payroll warrant register and accounts payable warrant register for February 2019 totaling $24,959,483.16, and bank transfers for February 2019 totaling $60,740,000, presented by Mrs. Scallon, Chief Financial Officer, and recommended by the superintendent for approval. 8.12, payroll calendars for 2019-2020, presented by Mrs. Scallon, Chief Financial Officer, and recommended by the superintendent for approval. 8.13, request to increase purchase order 1900713 to Matthew Pellegrino, presented by Mr. Vince Wyndham, Program Director Purchasing, and recommended by the superintendent for approval. 8.14, renewal of tag-on bid RFQU 19-968-523-RN, bleacher repair and motorization, presented by Mr. Vince Wyndham, Program Director Purchasing, and recommended by the superintendent for approval. 8.15, tag-on bid purchase over $25,000 Mohawk, presented by Mr. Vince Wyndham, Program Director Purchasing, and recommended by the superintendent for approval. 8.16, tag-on bid RFP 16-04, speech and language therapy, presented by Mr. Vince Wyndham, Program Director Purchasing, and recommended by the superintendent for approval. 8.17, RFP 18-01401, A/403, special pay plan, presented by Mr. Russ Frakes, Risk Management Specialist, and recommended by the superintendent for approval. Mr. Frakes, I see you're in attendance, sir, so please come forward. Board members may have inquiries, and you may have a presentation.
Yes, no presentation really, other than I do have Trent Teasdale from Mid-America here with me as well. He is representing the respondent to this RFP.
Right.
And again, just to review, this program is is a mechanism by which eligible employees may receive compensation upon separating from the district for their accrued balance of sick and vacation leaves. So Mr. Teasdale here represents Mid-America again, and the folks, Ms. Scallon, Mr. McInnes, Mr. Wyndham, myself got together with Trent, hammered out all the details with those agreements. You can see they're pretty substantial. Dr. White, this is waiting for you.
No,
If you've
I'm
had-
trying to read them.
There's a lot of places to sign, I'll
Once
say
is
that,
enough.
so, yeah. But we've reached the agreement, and that, as is proposed, will take effect upon approval. June 1, we'll make that change and go through the implementation process. They're pretty practiced at that, and I think, so any details, any technical issues you want to get into or have questions about, Trent will be the gentleman to ask those of. So,
Okay.
any questions that anyone has?
Colleagues? All right, you're getting off easy.
I guess so. Very good.
Okay.
Thank you.
Thank you, guys.
Appreciate
Thank
it.
you. Thank you. Thank you. Welcome. All right, 8.18, interlocal agreement for emergency shelters between the School Board of Okaloosa County and the Board of County Commissioners of Okaloosa County, presented by Mr. Steve Horton, Assistant Superintendent, and recommended by the Superintendent for approval. 8.19, sale and disposal of surplus property and return of proceeds to Fort Walton Beach High School Band Booster Club account, presented by Ms. Rita Scallon, Chief Financial Officer, and recommended by the Superintendent for approval. 9.20, sale and disposal of surplus property, presented by Mr. Steve Bolton, Director of Facilities Planning and Maintenance, and recommended by the Superintendent for approval. 8.21, memorandum of understanding between Healthy Schools LLC and the School Board of Okaloosa County for in-school TDAP clinic, presented by Mrs. Terry Schroeder, Program Director, Student Services, and recommended by the Superintendent for approval. 8.22, Okaloosa Technical College LPN program schedule through June 2019, presented by Mr. Jeff Palmer, Director of Elementary Curriculum, and recommended by the Superintendent for approval. 8.23, Community Education Summer Driver Education Program, presented by Mr. Brian Humphrey, TSA, Student Intervention Services, Athletics and Discipline, and recommended by the Superintendent for approval. 8.24, English Language Learner, ELL, 3-year district plan, presented by Ms. Lisa Tucker, ESOL, TSA, and recommended by the Superintendent for approval. 8.25, course adoptions for the 2018-2019 school year, presented by Ms. Julianne Smith, Secondary Curriculum Specialist, and recommended by the Superintendent for approval. 8.26, renewal of the athletic coaching endorsement add-on program, presented by Mrs. Denise McLaughlin, Professional Development Specialist, and recommended by the Superintendent for approval. All right, very good. So that takes us through Section 8, moving on to Section 9. Superintendent's Human Resources Recommendations. 9.1 is an information item. This will be employees on administrative leave, presented by Dr. Lee Hale, Assistant Superintendent, Human Resources. 8.2, this is also an information item, Deferred Retirement Option Program, DROP, presented by Dr. Lee Hale, Assistant Superintendent, Human Resources. 9.3, Master Contract between the School Board of Okaloosa County and the Okaloosa County Education Association, effective July 1, 2018 through June 30th, 2021, presented by Dr. Hale, Assistant Superintendent, Human Resources, and recommended by the Superintendent for approval. 9.4, Addendum to the Master Contract between the School Board of Okaloosa County and the Okaloosa Education Staff Professionals, presented by Dr. Hale, Assistant Superintendent, Human Resources, and recommended by the Superintendent for approval. 9.5, proposed fiscal year 2018-2019 salary schedules for administrative, managerial, professional, technical, and temporary personnel, presented by Mrs. Rita Scallon, Chief Financial Officer, and recommended by the Superintendent for approval. 9.6, request to add an allocation for a specialist, Human Resources, presented by Dr. Hale, Assistant Superintendent of Human Resources, and recommended by the Superintendent for approval.
I would just comment
Sure.
that we had conversation about, in a low-budget shortfall year, the need to keep adding people and the justification for those. So just for public understanding why this is a considerable need.
Absolutely. So just like I shared with each of you when I called, so this is a situation where right now, Mr. Steve Chapman, as you know, is one of our investigators. We've also contracted out with Mr. Pellegrino to do additional investigations, and just being very transparent, we're getting up there to the point where we're extending the contract for Mr. Pellegrino probably beyond what we might pay for an employee. So this position would be, if it was in place for this school year, it would be for the rest of this school year and then all of next school year. At the end of next school year, we would then see where we are with investigations. If we're at a place where we hope that we would all be, this position would then go away. If we're not where we would like to be, the recommendation for the 2020-2021 school year would be to keep this position for one more year. So this would truly be an annual position based on need.
Thank you.
Yes, ma'am.
So
Perfect.
this position, the function would be the same as Mr. Pellegrino's?
As an investigator, yes, ma'am.
Okay, so,
So Mr. Pellegrino would then go away. That we would not be doing that contract going forward.
which is more cost-effective, to continue to keep Mr. Pellegrino or to add an employee?
Well, we're about to go past the $50,000 mark with Mr. Pellegrino. So there's that piece. And depending on what happens for the remainder of the year, we'll see where we end up. So there's a cost effectiveness piece, and then there's also efficiency as well. So this gentleman who does a great job, he lives out of Tallahassee. So getting over here when he's here is great. Sometimes there are lulls and when he can also come over here, and vacation times. So not only might we be better cost in terms of dollars, but we might be better efficiency as well.
So, to me, if we're going to hire this person, why can we not discontinue our contract with Mr. Pellegrino simultaneously, so we're only having the one cost effect?
But that's exactly what we will do.
Okay, so as soon as if we approve this, then we're going to have Mr. Pellegrino no longer have his services.
So he would finish the current
School year.
He'd finish the school year, but he would finish his current investigations. If we get a person hired, let's just say it's the May timeframe, and we get this person hired, the second person, then we would no longer give him additional cases.
Okay. Like we said when we were talking about the ESC plan, just so many the resources are limited, and of course, salaries and manpower, so to speak, takes up a big part of the budget.
Yes.
And I'm just concerned that, like Dr. Kelly said, we're adding, so, thank you.
Yes, ma'am.
I'm sorry, Mr.
Well,
Dess.
I'm just going to comment. As you saw up on the consent agenda, we just put some more money in for Mr.
Pellegrino,
Pellegrino,
yeah.
a lot. But I think that Mr. Chambers is trying to transform back over to where we
Right.
were before.
Yeah,
And at the amount of money we've spent on this outside investigator, it looks like another employee would actually be cost effective.
right.
Correct.
It's just there's going to be a short transition period because Mr. Pellegrino is working on a number of cases until the other person gets up to speed. But I think that's where the goal you're working toward.
Absolutely.
Right. And
But
I-
we're going to give him $50,000 more and do this, so it's just going to be a short time they overlap.
But
Well,
not
so-
necessarily give him $50,000 more right now. That's and you might be able to explain this better than I can, Rita, but it's an allocation that's there if it was needed.
And if it's needed, okay.
Yes,
gotcha.
It
ma'am.
may not be spent.
I would
I
just
understand.
add, too, that I believe that this would help us with one of the other issues we'd had, as I recall, being the timeliness of closing out those cases, that one would open and they would lag on forever and we wouldn't get closure. So I would see this as being able to help us with that issue, too.
And you're exactly right.
Yeah, we certainly want to
And,
get those
and,
on.
and I don't need to say this because I know you all know this, but at one time we had two
Yeah.
of these individuals,
Absolutely.
although it wasn't necessarily defined this way.
Mm-hmm.
And so in my mind, this is just an attempt to try to return to that based upon this request.
Yes, sir.
Understand that? Okay. All right, so moving on now to 9.7, personnel recommendations presented by Dr. Hale, Assistant Superintendent, Human Resources, and recommended by the Superintendent for approval. 9.8, employment separations presented by Dr. Hale, Assistant Superintendent, Human Resources, and recommended by the Superintendent for approval. 9.9, employee transfers presented by Dr. Hale, Assistant Superintendent, Human Resources, and recommended by the Superintendent. 9.10, employee reinstatement presented by Dr. Hale, Assistant Superintendent, Human Resources, and recommended by the Superintendent. 9.11, reinstatement reimbursement of sick leave due to line of duty illness, injury, medical examination presented by Dr. Lee Hale, Assistant Superintendent, Human Resources, and recommended by the Superintendent. And then 9.12, leave without pay presented by Dr. Lee Hale, Assistant Superintendent, Human Resources, and recommended by the Superintendent for approval. All right, so that moves us now to Section 10, Discussion Agenda. 10.1, request to schedule a workshop meeting for discussion of the disposition of the Lowry Place facility and movement of all administrative functions to the Niceville Central Complex by School Board Member Dewey Destin. So, Mr. Destin, I'll turn it over to you, sir.
Thank you, Chairman. I want to modify this somewhat. Since we left the Lowry Complex, our direction has been somewhat cloudy, and so I would like to request that our superintendent give us an update and his recommendations, and at that point, then we will go forward with a discussion at a workshop or some other public hearing.
Okay.
And I think we need his recommendations and his update so that we can move forward with a fact-based, rational plan on what it is we're doing. So,
Absolutely.
do you have any time frame that you think you need to come forward with a report like that?
First board meeting in May.
That sounds great. Thank you, Chairman.
Okay, yes, sir, and certainly I concur with what you're requesting. I guess my question now is, as it pertains to the agenda, this is listed as an action item, 10.1. Is this something that we delete, or since it's now an information request?
I think if Mr. Destin is satisfied that he's been able to make the request and the superintendent's responded, it could be pulled from the agenda. I don't know that you'll be voting on anything.
Well, I could make a motion to request that the superintendent provide it to us and how to keep it on the agenda and keep it clean.
Okay, it's fine with me. I just want to make sure we do the process right.
Yes, sir.
Okay. Any questions? All right, very good. All right, 10.2. There aren't any right now, but there might be. That's how that one works. All right, Section 11, Construction Program Owners Representatives Business. 11.2, Program Status Report by the Board's representative to the construction program. Mr. Destin.
Well, we have a number of items here, and we will be looking at those at the meeting on Monday. And at the moment, those are the only ones that will go forward, although we have a construction meeting on Monday morning, and
Okay.
and everything bubbles out of that, I will bring a report back.
All right. All right, Mr. Destin. Thank you, sir. All right, 11.2, authorization for a professional services agreement from Faithful and Gould for price validation for program number 6, task order number 3, Florosa Elementary School parent drop-off, pickup, relocation, traffic flow reconfiguration, presented by Dr. Bill Smith, Specialist, Facilities Planning and Maintenance, and recommended by the Superintendent for approval.
I'd like to hear about that.
That's a mouthful, isn't it?
Yes.
Long time.
Yeah, try to say that. Just, can you, I know you've been up here several times, and just give us a real quick where we are and what this item is in reference to.
An explanation is every time we issue a task order,
Okay.
we issue and request a proposal from Faithful and Gould to validate that task order.
Okay.
Sometimes those task orders, those proposals come in by the time I can get it on the same agenda that the task order's on, or the pre-GMP's on. Sometimes they're 3 or 4 days late, and later they missed it. This one just missed it, and we did not have a meeting at the end of last month, so
Right.
it threw it a little later. It's just the validation proposal for Faithful and Gould to validate the pre-GMP from Ferosa. When that number is brought back to the board, their estimate will be with that when it's presented to you to show you that the GMP is within the margin of error allowed in our program.
So it's basically a check-off kind of,
So checks and balance.
yeah. Okay, great. Thank
Okay?
you.
Thank you.
And board members, you can see the recommended action down there. There's a little more of a description in terms of cost and those kinds of things, what we'll pay. But in my opinion, this is money well spent because it gives us a level of assurance that what we're being asked to pay, someone else says, yes, that's a correct
That's a fair
amount.
price.
Or they say no. Okay,
I
good
think they
job.
also say if it goes over that, they're in trouble.
Yep. It's all
Rather than
right,
us.
right. All right, Dr. Smith, thank you, sir. All right, so moving on now to 11.3, certification of the Okaloosa County School District Facilities FISH data for 2018, presented by Mr. Steve Bolton, Director of Facilities Planning and Maintenance, and recommended by the Superintendent for approval. FISH stands for the Florida Inventory of Schoolhouses. Okay, very good. Moving on to Section 12, 12.1, Terms and Conditions Agreement for the Beta Test Addendum, Exhibit A between Cox Communications, NFS LLC, DBA, Cox Business, and the Okaloosa County School District, presented by Mr. Dustin Keith, Specialist, Seat Management, and recommended by the Superintendent for approval.
Could you come up a minute, please? And this isn't necessarily specific to this, but while we're on you, how you doing? Good. All right.
Good morning.
Good morning. We're going into testing,
Yes, ma'am.
right? And the big thing we hear is computers didn't work, we have some problems. You feel confident that everything's a go for our computer systems and testing?
Yes, ma'am, I do.
Okay, good. So, because we've just gotten started, I know with,
We got started on Monday.
and so far so good?
Yes, ma'am, so far so good.
Okay, I just wanted to verify that, because that, that seems to be a concern, making sure.
We do. We work, our department works very closely with Beth Barnes and testing administration, so we're very plugged in to the schools and their needs. As with anything in technology and anything in the world, things come up. And so it's how we react to those things, and we do it smartly as we move through that process. So, yes, I do feel confident.
And the phone system, everything's changed over now on the phones?
Yes, ma'am. And one of the things that we're bringing to the board today is this beta that Cox is offering us, which basically entails some of our phone numbers are out of market for Cox Communications. So our northern 682 numbers are out of market. So what this beta is going to allow us to do is bring those numbers into Cox's actual market. Right now, we're doing some programming things to make everything work.
You wouldn't call that spoofing, would you?
I won't on the record, sir. But we are doing some forwarding of virtual numbers. I won't bore you with those details, but this would help. This would help alleviate that. And there is a no cost to this beta solution. Cox has been nice enough to come forward and basically include us as a first business partner to get this done.
Very good.
All right.
Yes.
Thank you. Appreciate it.
Thank you, sir.
Yes, yes.
All right, so moving on now to Mr. Attorney, your business, sir.
One item, Mr. Chairman, I need to ask the board to allow us to schedule a attorney-client session regarding pending litigation in case number 318 CV 00453. I would propose that we could schedule the special meeting at 8 o'clock on April the 18th, which is just the hour before you would have a workshop that day. So that's simply
Yes, sir.
an announcement that we need to get that done.
All right, board members, any questions about that particular item? So that'll be an action item. We need to vote.
No, sir, we'll just move forward
do
with
it.
scheduling. I just
Okay.
needed to announce to you in this
Good.
open session that we
Yes,
need to
sir.
schedule that.
Okay, well, please do so then. All right, Superintendent, you've got some field trip requests there, and moving down to 14.2, anything else that you may have?
All right, very briefly, kind of like we just alluded to, the testing season is upon us. So FSA testing and other associated testings, they have started, and that'll continue through May. So I do want to just say very quickly, As you know, our teachers and our ed support and our schools they always work extremely hard, and this, in essence, is the culmination. So just very much appreciate all the work that's gone into it for the sake of our students. I've already mentioned, so we've started ESC teacher meetings, and that has gone extremely well. I was very proud of the teachers yesterday. They had some great suggestions, and they had some great input as well. So that was very much appreciated. This is Month of the Military Child, and you may see some of our schools who's putting that information out. We're also going to be in contact with our schools to ensure that we are getting that information out. Obviously, we are a very heavy military community and love the relationship and the partnership that we have with Eglin and Hobart, and it is Month of the Military Child. It is also Autism Awareness Month. Our ESC department has done a great job. Tammy Ellis has also helped us in this venture in terms of being creative, and you'll see on social media a lot of lighted up blue, and it's been neat, and our schools are doing a great job, from autism facts to coming together to the pictures with students and staff. But you'll see over the course of this month a lot that is going on there. When we were at the Emerald Coast Autism Center yesterday, it was amazing that they have a coffee program over there, and they call it Lighted Up Brew. So I thought that was interesting.
cute.
And then the last piece, I normally wouldn't say this, but right now with Mr. Bryant not here, he may say it on Monday, that I was fortunate enough yesterday to be in Crestview at the where Crestview boys basketball team was celebrated with the community, with the big red machine. The band was there, cheerleaders, what they call their dog pound. So they were all there, former principals were there, and they celebrated the state title. So it was a big deal, and I appreciated being a part of that.
Very good. All right, Mr. Destin, do you have anything?
Thank you, Chairman. I don't have anything this morning.
Okay, Dr. Kelly?
Just a lot of end-of-the-year celebrations and activities, so busy time of the year, and looking forward to attending as many of those as I can.
Ms. Evanche?
I do. I have a couple things. First of all, Dr. Kelly and I just came back from Tallahassee, where we were at the new School Board Members Academy. So we've been taught here some things about being new, and it was a very good, informative thing. And of course, now the legislature days are going on, and that's where Mr. Bryant is. He's down taking part of that, which is a great thing. And it was good for us to network with other board members in other places, and in many cases, we're listening to their stories going, I'm ready to go back to Okaloosa. So that was good. A couple of things. Last night I was at an art show. It was a big art show by Miss Emily Day over at Niceville High School. It was fabulous. Really enjoyed that. Ultimately, all the schools will have their top art put in the district art show coming up April 24th and 25th. That's always great. These students are extremely talented. And then coming up, actually, tonight, the Choctaw Jazz Band is doing a sweet night out over at Shalimar United Methodist Church, where they always do a really great job. One other thing I'd like to run by board members that we're talking about all this information with ESC, and we're working with that, and things we were talking about that the community doesn't know and parent want to know. I think a lot of things that we're doing great in our school district, the information's not getting to the public. And I've spoken with Mr. Chambers about this, about in the fall, board members having a time where we could have an event where we could come together and kind of show off and let the public be aware of a lot of things that we're doing, working with our community and focusing on this. We've talked a couple of times. As you know, I'm on the board of the Public Schools Foundation, and I've spoken with the foundation members about having an event in the early fall where we can take our things to the public, where schools can show their programs and things. Nobody can get around to seeing all the information and things that we have. So I'd like your feedback, if you want to give it, on what we could do about having a like Okaloosa Schools, day. And we get with our community leaders to back us on that and show our partnership with them. So we've talked about it, and we're working on moving forward with that. So any input you have on doing something like that, I would love to have. That's it for me. Thank you.
All right, so under my business, I'm going to pass out a letter that I received from Sheriff Gugliani. I think I'm saying that correctly. So if you'll please take one of those. And sometimes when you're serving at your pleasure as school board chairperson, you receive correspondence. And sometimes when I receive that correspondence, I want to make sure that you get it too. And as you'll see in this particular letter from Sheriff Gugliani, you know, I think all the board members that are here today attended the presentation that he conducted at Northwest Florida State College. I think it ran about, well, I guess about 4 hours.
Longer than
In
it's
which
scheduled.
the sheriff, who was appointed as the chairman of the Marjorie Stoneman Douglas High School Public Safety Commission, presented his findings. And I know that because I saw your faces, that when the video of that school tragedy was shown, I know that you reacted the same way that I did. But in any case, as you read through the good sheriff's letter that he sent to me, that I've now given to all of you, the sheriff makes some very strong recommendations. And the most important recommendation in this letter, and I've underlined it, please forgive my scratching there, but I've underlined for you, the sheriff recommends that the school district implement the school guardian program. And this is something that he has put in writing to me. And we went to that presentation. And I would just say this, I don't yet know what the superintendent will recommend. And I'm certainly not asking any of you to reveal what your vote or what your thoughts about that might be at this time. But I wanted to make sure that you receive the same correspondence that I received, that it is his strongest recommendation that this school district, and for that matter, all school districts in Florida, implement the school guardian program. Now, before the emails fly and the press prints, let me say, the guardian program is spelled out in great specifics in Florida statute. It is not something that we're just going to be having folks carrying firearms in schools. The requirements for the guardian program are extensive. In fact, the sheriff said in his presentation, and you might remember this, that the requirements for individuals that might volunteer to do this and that might even be selected, provided that they pass the battery of tests that would be required, and provided that they pass the qualifying credentials. But in fact, these individuals would have the same level of certification as would a rookie policeman or sheriff's deputy. That was a comment that Sheriff Gugliari made. And so I want to make it very clear that this is a very, very high level possibility should the superintendent and this school board choose to do this. And in addition to that, these would be individuals that not only would have that level of qualification and certification, they would have degrees, even awarded at the highest levels. And so I wanted just to make sure that all you board members got the same letter that I got, in which the good sheriff makes this recommendation to this school board. All right, and so that's really all I've got to say about this matter at this time.
Could I just
Sure.
add that it might be important that each of us has a conversation with our own sheriff for his input? I have done that, so you may want to do that.
Mhm.
He did make a very compelling argument.
In my opinion, there's
And
no
it'll be
question.
interesting to talk to our sheriff, see what he says.
And I appreciate you saying that, Mr. Destin, because I would share with the board members and the public that there are portions of his presentation freely available on YouTube and Vimeo. And there wasn't anything quite more moving than seeing the teacher trying to defend himself and his students with a ruler.
Yardstick, yeah, that's very eye-opening.
There's another one you might be interested in hearing on YouTube as well. It's from Mr. D, who was the principal at Columbine. And he talks about not just the incident, but the ongoing things that the community and the school are still dealing with. details such as not serving the same meal that was served that day that students were eating that you wouldn't even anticipate. So that also is very enlightening to listen to. I think he has a new book out as well,
All right.
Mr. D.
And what I'd like to point out for the public is the opening paragraph, the last sentence that the sheriff wrote. He says, "I'm writing on behalf of the commission to encourage you and your school district to fully implement the Guardian program and maximize school safety in your district." I don't know that he could have said it any more powerfully. All right, anything else?
And I would like to add, as we go forward into 2019-20, school student safety will continue to be the number one priority. And I think, as we all know here, student safety is different maybe than what it was a number of years ago. So student safety is also the mental health component of it. So we're working hard on that. Student safety is infrastructure. We're working hard on that, and student safety is also part of this Guardian program. So over the course of the last 12 weeks, I've learned a lot more about student safety. What I would like to request, I would like to request a special board meeting to conduct in a closed session to discuss school safety and security. I think, as you know, when it comes to safety and security, we can't share with the public our plans for security reasons. So I very much would like to have that scheduled at your leisure. I think it's important to share, what we've done to date, where we're going, and have those appropriate discussions. So I would request a special board meeting that would be a closed session.
So, Mr. Attorney, how is it that we go about, first of all, give us the law on that, and then, and second of all, how do we go about doing that should the board wish to do that?
You do have the ability to, we would convene as a special board meeting, and then we would go into a closed session for the portion of the meeting in which the details of safety and security plans and programs and proposals are being discussed. That information is not subject to the public record law. It is confidential, obviously, because of the need to protect those security plans and systems. And so what we simply need to do, if the board is willing to conduct this meeting, would be to have Jan or Mary work with your schedules to find a date when it can be scheduled, and we'll do an appropriate public notice of the meeting and identifying that there will be a portion of that meeting that will be closed under Florida law.
All right, I see. Any questions or comments, board members? You want to move forward with that?
I do.
I think we have a consensus on that.
Yeah.
Okay. All right, very good. Would you work that out with Jan and Mary, Mr. McInnes, and superintendent, and then also the press releases and all those kind of things we have to do? Sure. Okay. All right. All right.
And Dr. White, one
Yes, sir.
last piece.
Yes, sir.
And this past week, we had a meeting, myself and staff had a meeting with the sheriff on Tuesday, I believe it was Tuesday, also to discuss the Guardian program as well, and to get his thoughts on the Guardian program. The sheriff is very willing to come to a board meeting and discuss his thoughts. So I think it's obviously extremely important that we have that strong partnership with the sheriff, and we had an excellent meeting discussing this matter.
So I believe we should invite him to that meeting, correct? Can we do that? Even though it's closed when he could come if we want him? Okay.
Yes, ma'am.
I think we need to get with his schedule and see what we can do to, I think his input is essential in making a decision.
And Mr. Horton, who's worked with school safety, and specifically Mr. Danny Dean,
Yeah.
I think would be instrumental as well.
Absolutely.
All right. Well, that brings us to wrap up of today's workshop. So unless there's any, well, we do have, let's go down to look at the public hearing. 17.1, public hearing for the adoption of a new school board policy 04-49, school threat assessment teams, presented by Mr. Danny Dean, Specialist, Student Intervention Services and Safe Schools, and recommended by the superintendent for approval. And then that finally gets us to adjournment. Unless there's anything else, Superintendent, Mr. Attorney, or staff? All right, this workshop is adjourned.